It wasn't someone you knew. That's the part that stayed with you. A stranger, someone with no connection to your story, no role in your life, no reason to matter, and yet something in the way they moved, or the way they looked up at a specific moment, or the particular quality of their stillness landed in you like a key, finding a lock you forgot existed. Your hands registered it before your mind could intervene. Not a thought, a recognition, something old and specific arriving through the wrong person entirely. That wasn't about them. You already knew that. The soul doesn't confuse its signals. It borrows carriers when it needs to deliver something the mind would otherwise refuse. And what arrived through that stranger wasn't information about them. It was information about you, about what is alive in you, about what has not closed, what is not hardened, what is still, after everything, completely capable of being reached. You are here because something in you knew this transmission was already waiting, not the algorithm, not chance. The same navigation system that sent that recognition through a stranger's face brought you to this exact moment. Before we go deeper into what is happening in the sky right now and why today is not an ordinary day, like this video, subscribe, and comment below. My heart is open, not as a wish, as a declaration of what you just felt land in your body. That's your nervous system confirming it received the signal. Everything that follows lands differently when you've already said yes. Because here is what that moment with the stranger was actually telling you. The wall you thought was still in place isn't as solid as it looked. And what's arriving today, right now, in the specific arrangement of planets overhead, is about to make that undeniably, irreversibly clear. There is a specific kind of person this transmission reaches. Not the person who has been casually curious about love, or vaguely hoping things will improve, or waiting for the right mood to do the inner work. The person who is here right now is someone who kept going when going produced nothing visible in return. You kept refining your understanding of yourself, kept examining what you wanted, what you were willing to accept, what the pattern was. Not because someone confirmed it was working, not because the external situation was showing signs of shifting, but because something in you refused to stop while the work was still unfinished. That's not a small thing. That is the precise credential this portal requires. And today, July 28th, 2026, is the day that credential gets honored. What is happening in the sky right now is not subtle. The Sun and Jupiter are sitting within a single degree of each other in Leo, and if you have never followed astrology a day in your life, here is what that means in plain language. The Sun is the force that governs what you are willing to be seen as. It is the part of you that steps into a room and either occupies it fully or shrinks to fit someone else's comfort. In Leo, the Sun is at its most sovereign, not arrogant, not loud, but genuinely unwilling to make itself smaller to ease someone else's discomfort with its size. Jupiter is the force that expands everything it touches. It is the planet of amplification, of taking what already exists and multiplying its reach, its visibility, its truth. When these two forces sit in the same degree of the sky, within less than 1 degree of exactitude, what happens is not metaphorical. What happens is that everything you have been quietly building inside yourself gets turned up. Loud, undeniable, visible, to you first, and then to everything around you. But that is not the only thing happening today. Across the sky, in exact opposition to this Sun-Jupiter surge, sits Pluto. And Pluto is the force that strips away everything that was never real, not gently, not apologetically, but with the kind of precision that leaves no question about what was genuine and what was constructed for comfort. Pluto in retrograde means it has turned its dismantling energy inward. It is not tearing down external structures right now. It is completing the internal demolition. The last wall, the final fiction, the story you have been telling yourself about why the love in you needed to stay contained, why the heart needed to stay at a manageable size, why feeling this fully was somehow dangerous. Pluto today does not ask your permission to finish that work. And threaded through this whole configuration, the Sun's surge, Jupiter's amplification, Pluto's final clearing, is a precise trine to Neptune and a sextile to Uranus. Neptune dissolves the barriers between what you feel and what you've been pretending not to feel. It is the planet that makes the walls between your defended self and your actual self suddenly permeable, not permeable, let me say it differently, suddenly thin, paper thin. And Uranus is the force of sudden recognition, not gradual understanding, the lightning bolt knowing that arrives in a single moment and cannot be unarrived. Together, these 4 planets are not asking your heart chakra to open. They are forcing the question of why it was ever closed. This is not an emotional event. This is a planetary fact landing in your body as an emotional event. This is why today is not a gentle nudge. This is the surge. This portal does not open for everyone experiencing this transit. It opens for a specific person, and you already know if that person is you. It opens for someone who is loved with full presence in a dynamic that did not return full presence. Someone who gave what was real, received what was partial, and made a choice. Not immediately, not dramatically, but eventually and completely, to stop calling partial presence enough. That was not rejection. That was redirection. Not away from love, toward a version of love that could actually hold the full weight of what you have to give without bending under it. And there were moments along the way that cost something real, moments when someone who was wrong came back with the right words, and you felt everything in you want to believe them and you didn't. Not because you had stopped feeling, because something in you had gotten honest about what words without transformation actually produce. That was not silence. That was selection. You were selecting, not for the absence of love, but for the presence of something real. And then the timeline stretched, longer than you expected, longer than felt fair. That was not too long. That was exactly long enough, not as consolation, but as precision. What you have now that you did not have 12 months ago cannot be named simply. It is a knowing that lives below language, a clarity that doesn't require reassurance because it was built, not borrowed. Stay with this. What comes next is the part most people miss. The universe did not delay this to punish you. There is no punishment in this system. There is only precision. And the precision of this delay specifically was about what you would have done with arrival before now. If this had arrived earlier, not the person, the opening, the recognition, the full surge of what is available right now, you would have arrived at it still carrying the unresolved question of your own worth, still needing the connection to answer something about you, still using the dynamic as evidence, evidence that you were lovable, that you were chosen, that you were enough. And a connection that must carry that question can never be about genuine contact. It becomes instead about confirmation. And confirmation is not the same as love. It resembles love. It activates the same signals, but it is doing a completely different job. The delay was not the universe withholding. The delay was the universe protecting you from receiving love as proof rather than as presence. What is different now, and this is the thing the mind often cannot see about itself, is that the question has stopped running, not because you silenced it, because it got answered from inside. Somewhere in the stretch of this long, unrewarded, unwitnessed internal work, the question of whether you are enough stopped being a question, not with a declaration, not with a moment of triumph. It simply stopped. The way a sound stops when the thing producing it no longer exists. And what remains in that absence is not emptiness. It is space, real space, the kind that can hold something genuine without immediately converting it into evidence for or against a verdict about yourself. That is what the silence built. And now you understand why it had to last as long as it did. There is one more thing happening right now, on the other side of the silence, that changes the entire meaning of what you have been living through. The person connected to you in this specific window is not indifferent. They are not unaware. They are not moving through their days with the comfortable distance that people sometimes manufacture to avoid what they feel. They are sitting at the edge of the most honest moment they have had in a very long time, held in place not by avoidance, but by the full weight of what honesty would require them to admit. This is the almost ready. The person who has run out of reasons to stay where they are but has not yet taken the step that would change everything, not because they don't know what they want. They know, not because they don't feel what they feel. They feel it in the gap between tasks, in the quality of silence after a conversation with someone who isn't you, in the specific texture of lying still at night when the mind can no longer be redirected by movement. They feel it in all of these places, and they have stopped trying to file it away. What this specific planetary configuration does to someone in that position is remove the last remaining structural support for staying still. The Sun-Jupiter surge in Leo makes it impossible to maintain the story that the love they feel is manageable, containable, something to be returned to on their own schedule. Jupiter doesn't amplify quietly, and the Pluto opposition is completing its work on their side of the connection as well, clearing the final layer of the story they built to justify the silence. Not the first layer, that went a long time ago. The final one, the one that felt most reasonable, most self-protective, most like the conclusion a mature person would reach. That layer is dissolving today, not because they decided to let it, because it no longer holds. They are sitting with something they cannot root around, not a feeling they chose to examine, a recognition that arrived and refused to be redirected. The quality of it in their body is specific, a fullness in the throat that is not grief, a weight in the hands that is not regret, a stillness in the chest that is not peace. It is the particular sensation of someone who is about to say something true for the first time, who has rehearsed the easier version so many times that the honest version now feels foreign in the mouth and necessary in a way that the rehearsed version never was. They know. They have always known. Today is the day the knowing became too heavy to carry quietly, and here is where you stand. Not at a dramatic crossroads with two roads stretching visibly in opposite directions. At a quiet one, the kind that happens inside an ordinary moment where nothing external is forcing the choice and nothing is watching to confirm you made the right one. You are not being tested, you are being asked to show yourself what you have actually become. There are two internal states available to you right now. One of them is familiar. It is the background process, the constant low-level management of the situation, the part of your mind that is always already anticipating the next wave, already preparing for the specific version of disappointment it knows by heart, already organizing itself around controlling what happens next so that the outcome stays inside the range of what is bearable. This state is not malicious. It built itself to protect you, and it has been running so long that its hum has become almost indistinguishable from silence. The other state is different in quality. It is not louder, it is cleaner. It is the experience of being fully inside a moment rather than perpetually preparing for the next one. Not indifference. The love is completely present in this state. But the grip is gone, the jaw is not set, the thought is not already racing 3 steps ahead to mitigate the risk of what arrives. There is a quality to it that is difficult to describe to someone who hasn't felt it, and instantly recognizable to someone who has. The difference between someone bracing and someone receiving. Most people, when they reach this crossroads, interpret it as a choice between caring and not caring. It is not that. It is a choice between managing love and allowing it. And those are not the same country. Can you feel the difference in your body right now between the state that holds and controls and the state that simply opens? The soul does not run this question to punish you. It runs it because the answer determines everything that follows, not as consequence, but as direction. The answer to that question is already in the body. It arrived before the mind formed the words. Trust what was there first. Now go to the layer beneath the connection itself, beneath the longing, beneath the questions about what they feel, beneath the practical uncertainty of what happens next. Go to what this specific soul contract came to teach. This contract was never primarily about them. Soul contracts never are. They use the shape of another person, their specific way of withholding, their specific way of arriving, the particular dynamic their presence created, to deliver a lesson that has nothing to do with them and everything to do with you. The lesson this contract carried was about trust, not trust in another person, trust in a process you cannot see and cannot steer. What you have spent the last period of your life learning, in the most uncomfortable, most unrewarded, most invisible way possible, is the difference between controlling outcomes and allowing reality to arrive in its own form. The contract placed you in a situation where the outcome you most wanted was structurally unavailable for as long as you were trying to manage it into existence. Every time urgency reached for resolution, the resolution retreated. Every time you tried to steer the situation toward the version the mind had decided was acceptable, the situation revealed another dimension that the steering had missed. This was not the universe being cruel. This was the lesson being delivered with precision. The only way through was through surrender. And surrender, real surrender, not performance of surrender, is the hardest thing the ego has ever been asked to do. There is grief in recognizing this. real grief. The grief of understanding how much energy went into the management, how many hours, how many internal calculations, how many versions of the possible future were constructed and discarded in service of a strategy that was never going to produce what it was reaching for. That energy was not wasted. It was the price of finally understanding. But it costs something to see it clearly. Give that grief a full breath. It deserves one. Saturn enforces these contracts through a mechanism that is not comfortable but is completely fair. The lesson does not complete until it is genuinely integrated, not performed, not intellectually understood, not survived. Genuinely integrated, meaning the behavior changes not because the rule changed, but because the person changed. The moment of real integration is always quiet. It does not announce itself. It feels less like an achievement and more like a setting down. Something that was carried is finally, actually, placed on the ground. The contract did not promise an outcome. It promised a change in who you are, and that promise has already been kept. What completion looks like through this specific lesson is not reunion. It is not resolution. It is not even peace as a feeling. It is the ability to hold uncertainty, to sit inside not knowing without converting the not knowing into urgency, to allow what is real to arrive in its own form and timing without the mind interceding to shape it into something more manageable. That capacity is new in you. It is recent. And it is real, and it does not require their return to prove it because it was built entirely independently of what they do or don't do next. The contract was always about what you were becoming, not about whether they stayed to witness it. What you became is already real, regardless of what they do next. Your body already received this before your mind had language for it, and what it registered is not the surge of adrenaline that arrives with hope. This is something quieter and more durable. There is a particular quality of quiet in your body right now that is different from the quiet of the last several months. Not the quiet of waiting, you know that texture well, the particular heldness of a body that is always at low-grade readiness for something to arrive or not arrive. This is a different kind, a quiet that has no urgency behind it. Something in you has settled in the way a glass of water settles after being carried, not dramatically, not with announcement, but with a completeness that feels final. Sleep is arriving differently, not just the hour of it, but the quality of the first minutes of waking, the residue that used to be there, that low-grade assessment that the mind ran the moment consciousness returned, scanning for what was still unresolved, what still needed attention, what the situation looked like this morning. That residue is lighter. Sometimes it is absent entirely. The body is not scanning. It is simply waking. Certain names pass through your awareness now without the physical brace that used to accompany them. They arrive, and this is worth paying attention to. They arrive as information rather than as impact. Where there used to be a small contraction, a tightening somewhere specific in the body, now there is something more neutral. The name is present. The feeling is present, but the body is no longer organizing itself around it as if it were a threat. There is a stillness in the hands that is new, not the stillness of someone who has suppressed what they want to do. You know that texture, the effortful quality of not reaching. This is the stillness of someone who no longer needs to reach because the urgency that drove the reaching has quieted, not because the desire is gone, because the desire has changed shape. Where it once sat in the body as a pressure looking for release, it now sits as something closer to a fact, solid, patient, not frantic. This is not numbness. You know the difference now between numbness and settling. Numbness has a flatness to it, a muffled quality, the sense of something present being held at arm's length. What you are experiencing has texture and depth and full emotional presence. It is simply not anxious. It is not anxious. That is the shift. That is everything. Something that was held at a low, constant level of readiness has finally begun to rest, not because the danger passed, because the body stopped believing it was coming. This settling is changing something concrete and daily about the way you relate to what you want. It is not abstract. Here is the specific difference it is making. Wanting something used to arrive with a particular companion, a kind of leaning, a reaching toward that lived in the body as something slightly forward of center. The desire and the reaching were fused together so that wanting something automatically produced the sensation of moving toward it, managing it, trying to close the gap between where you were and where you wanted to be. The desire and the urgency were the same thing. You could not feel one without the other. What is different now, and you have noticed this even if you haven't named it, is that they have separated. The desire is still completely present. What you want is clear. Clearer, actually, than it has ever been. But the reaching quality has quieted. The gap between where you are and where you want to be no longer produces automatic urgency. The wanting sits in the body differently, less like a problem to be solved and more like a direction to move in, without the grip, without the constant calculation of how to make it happen faster. This changes what you do with a Tuesday afternoon in a way that is not philosophical. It is practical and physical. An ordinary stretch of time that would previously have been colonized by the background process, the managing, the anticipating, the running of the situation's variables, now simply exists as an afternoon. There is space in it, not emptiness. Space, the kind that is compatible with genuine presence rather than constant preparation. And the quality of wanting itself, the actual felt experience of desiring something, has a different texture now. Where it once felt like hunger looking for its specific food, it now feels more like clarity pointing in a specific direction. Hunger and clarity are not the same thing. Hunger is reactive. Clarity is generative. Hunger reaches. Clarity moves. The part of you that needed outside confirmation to feel certain has completed its work. What remains does not require reflection to stay real. It simply is. That is not a small change. That is the whole change, which means something else has shifted too. After this kind of activation, after this particular combination of planetary forces finishes its work in the body, certain things become unavailable to you in a way that is not a decision and not a rule. It is a biological fact about what the system will and won't accommodate anymore. Being held at emotional arm's length by someone who knows exactly what they feel, who has full clarity on the situation and chooses the comfort of ambiguity over the cost of honesty, your nervous system will no longer process this as something to wait out. Where it once generated patience, it now generates information. The information is simply, this is not the dynamic, not anger, not shutdown, a quiet physical knowing that this specific configuration of withholding is not something the body will organize itself around anymore. Carrying the full weight of a connection while the other person remains comfortable in its ambiguity is a specific kind of labor, and your system has completed the version of itself that could sustain that labor indefinitely. Not because you stopped caring, because the part of you that used to interpret that labor as evidence of the depth of your love has been updated. You now understand that carrying more than your share is not evidence of depth. It is evidence of imbalance, and imbalance is not sustainable, not because you are weak, but because nothing that is structurally unequal can last. Your body knew this before your mind agreed, and explaining your depth to someone who uses your explanation as proof that you are too much. There is something in you now that registers this the way a trained ear registers a wrong note. Not with analysis, not with deliberation. Before the thought forms, the body has already produced its verdict. This is wrong, not wrong as a moral judgment, wrong as a frequency. The way the ear doesn't decide a note is off, it simply knows. You did not close yourself, you clarified. And clarity does not reduce what is possible. It removes what was never going to be real anyway, and makes the remaining space available for what actually is. And into that cleared space, if and when this soul steps back into your field, here is what will be different. The question of whether you still want this is not the question. You know the answer to that. What you don't yet know is whether what returns is genuinely different or whether what returns is the same version of the dynamic wearing the costume of transformation. And the crucial thing, the thing that has changed in you, is that you are now capable of reading that accurately. Before, hope bent the signal. Before, the longing was loud enough to override the information your body was trying to deliver about what was actually happening versus what you wanted to be happening. You would receive a partial presence and call it arrival. You would receive changed words and call it changed behavior. You would receive proximity and call it intimacy. Not because you were foolish, because the need to confirm your own worth through their return was running louder than the discernment. That frequency has quieted, and in the quiet, the signal is clean. If they return, your body will register what kind of return it is before your mind has formed a verdict. The quality of their presence will be legible in a way it wasn't before, not because you are harder, but because you are clearer. Sustained presence will feel different from performed presence. Genuine transformation will feel different from the gesture of transformation. You will know because the body doesn't lie when it's no longer in the service of a need. If they return with something real, with the kind of presence that has actually changed because something in them genuinely changed, you receive it from ground that is yours. Not from need, not from relief. From wholeness, meeting wholeness, which is the only version of this connection that could have ever actually worked. And if they don't return, if the silence extends into the next timeline and the answer is simply absence, here is what that confirms. Not that you were not enough, not that the love was not real. It confirms that what was being asked of this connection, what both of you would have needed to become for it to function at the level it was always meant to reach, required exactly this much time, this much internal work, this much transformation on both sides. And if only one side completed that work, then what doesn't arrive is not the love of your life choosing absence. It is two paths that were genuinely parallel, genuinely meaningful, genuinely formative, that simply did not arrive at the same destination at the same moment. Both outcomes leave you intact, not as a philosophy you are choosing to believe, as something you are actually built from now. You have been remade by this, quietly, without announcement, in the exact window where it had to happen to be real. What is here now is not someone bracing for the answer. It is someone who already knows who they are regardless of it. Both doors open onto something real now, not because the outcomes are equal, because you are no longer different people depending on which one walks through. That steadiness is the thing. That is everything. If this transmission landed somewhere specific in your body, not just in your thoughts, but in the actual physical space of your shoulders, your hands, the quality of your next breath, do one thing right now. Like this video. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. These transmissions build on each other, and what opens in this window connects directly to what arrives in the next one. And in the comments, write, "I allow what is real." Say it out loud as you type it, not for anyone reading, for your own body, because words spoken with real intention complete something that silent reading leaves unfinished. And if someone in your life is standing at a threshold they can't quite name, share this with them. The soul already knows who needs it. What is already here is not a possibility. It is not a promise. It is not a potential outcome available to you if you manage the situation correctly. What is here, what has been building through every unrewarded, unwitnessed, invisible hour of the work you have been doing, has already arrived. It arrived without fanfare. It arrived while you were doing something ordinary. It arrived in the quiet that followed the last wave of urgency, when you realized the urgency had simply stopped. The door did not open with a sound. It opened in the particular way that permanent things open, not dramatically, but undeniably, and you are already standing on the other side of it. You have been, for longer than you know. What today does is let you finally see the ground beneath your feet, solid, real, yours. Not because the planets gave it to you, because you built it. And what is built that completely does not need to announce itself. It simply holds. And what holds does not require tending the way that fragile things require tending. This is the part that is still surprising you, even now, the absence of the maintenance. The old version of this interior required constant upkeep. There was always something to check, something to reinforce, something to reassure back into place when a moment of doubt arrived and found a crack. You did not know how much energy that was costing until it stopped. Until one ordinary morning the maintenance simply wasn't running, and instead of filling that space with something new to worry about, you noticed the space itself. How much of it there was, how quiet it was, how it had been there all along, waiting underneath the noise of the managing. That space is not emptiness. Do not mistake it for emptiness. It is the specific quality of a life that has stopped organizing itself around a wound that has finished its work. The wound did what wounds are built to do. It opened something, insisted on something, refused to let certain comfortable fictions stand, and now it is done, not healed in the sense of erased, completed in the sense of fulfilled, the way a seed completes its purpose, not when it stays a seed, but when it becomes what the seed always contained. You are not the wound anymore. You are what the wound was always making room for. This is not a small distinction. This is the whole distinction. There is a version of this moment that the old you would have reached for, and the current you is simply inhabiting. The old version would have needed to perform this arrival, to announce it somehow, to have it witnessed, to locate it in the external world through someone else's recognition of the change. Not out of vanity, out of the same unresolved question that ran through everything. Am I real? Am I seen? Does this count if no one else can confirm it? And the current version, the one that has done the specific, unrewarded, invisible work of these past months, does not need the performance, not because the feeling is smaller, because the ground it stands on doesn't require an audience to stay solid. This is why the stranger's face landed the way it did, not because they were carrying anything for you, because your system had finally become sensitive enough, clear enough, uncluttered enough, to receive a signal without distorting it through the noise of need. The recognition came clean. It arrived as what it was, a confirmation of your own aliveness, your own openness, your own complete and unreduced capacity for love, without immediately converting into a question about whether you were worthy of it. That conversion used to be automatic. It ran before you could intervene. Recognition would arrive, and within the same breath it would become, but do I deserve this? But will it last? But what if? And the original signal would be buried under the interrogation of it. That interrogation has quieted, not because you silenced it by force, because the question it was running on behalf of no longer has the same grip. And in the quiet after the question releases, what you are left with is the signal itself, pure, unmediated, yours. Here is what that means for what arrives next. What comes into your life from this point forward will enter a different field than the one that existed 12 months ago. Not a field of higher vibration. That language is too abstract for what is actually happening. A field of greater accuracy. What you feel about what arrives will be more reliable. The attraction you feel toward something will be cleaner information, not distorted by the old need to locate your worth in what chooses you, not bent by the urgency of wanting the story to resolve in a specific way. When something good arrives, you will know it is good because you can actually feel its quality rather than its function. When something is wrong, the body will say so before the mind has assembled a case. This is the gift inside the long stretch of unrewarded work that no one saw. Not resilience as a personality trait, something more specific than that. A recalibration of the instruments. You spent a significant portion of time in conditions that offered very little external feedback, which meant the only feedback available was internal. And because that was the only feedback available, you learned to read it with a precision that people who received constant external confirmation never had to develop. You learned the difference between a thought and a knowing, between hope distorting a signal and a signal arriving clean, between the story you wanted to be true and the thing that was actually true. That distinction, that ability to read your own interior accurately, is not a consolation prize for the difficulty. It is the most valuable thing this entire timeline produced, and it cannot be taught. It can only be built, in exactly the way you built it, in private, in the absence of reward, across the specific stretch of time that the work required. Stay with this for one more moment before the next thing arrives, because this is the part that wants to be fully felt rather than quickly understood. What you are carrying right now is not hope. You have carried hope before. You know its texture, the way it sits slightly forward of center in the body, the way it leans toward the future rather than inhabiting the present, the way it requires a specific outcome to survive. This is not that. What you are carrying right now is something older and more stable than hope. It is the particular quality of someone who has already arrived somewhere and knows it, not with triumph, not with relief, but with the quiet certainty of a person who has done something real and can feel the solidity of it underfoot. The planets overhead today are not creating this. Let that land fully. The Sun and Jupiter together in Leo, the opposition to Pluto, the trine to Neptune, the sextile to Uranus. This configuration is not building something new in you from nothing. It is illuminating what you already built. It is turning the light on in a room that has been furnished for longer than you realized, that has been ready for longer than you knew, that was waiting not for the right person to arrive, but for you to stop standing in the doorway wondering if you deserved to walk in. Walk in, not as an instruction, as a description of what is already happening. The threshold is already behind you. The room is already where you are standing. What the sky is doing today is simply making the lights bright enough that you can finally see the full dimensions of what you built in the dark and recognize it as yours, completely, without qualification, without the asterisk of someone else's confirmation required to make it real. The love that is available to you now, whether it arrives through the return of someone specific or through the arrival of something entirely new, will enter a life that is no longer organized around proving anything. It will enter a life that is organized around being itself, fully, without apology, without the constant background management of how it is being perceived, without the ongoing calculation of whether it is too much or not enough. It will simply be what it is, and what it is, when it finally has room to be that without interference, is extraordinary. Not as a future promise, as a present fact about what you have always been capable of, now finally given the conditions it needed to stand upright. Where it once bent to fit, it now simply stands. Where it once asked permission to be real, it now requires none. Where it once waited to be chosen before it believed in itself, it has already chosen itself, and the choosing is done, and it is solid, and it is not going anywhere. That is the surge. That is the shockwave. That is what the sky is doing today, not to you, but through you, because you are the one who made yourself available to receive it. Not by being special, by doing the work. By continuing when continuing produced nothing visible, by choosing in 100 quiet, unremarkable moments to remain honest rather than comfortable. This is not the end of something. This is the beginning of the version of your life that the whole previous chapter was always building toward, and it does not begin with a dramatic event or a specific arrival or a signal from outside. It begins in exactly this moment, in the particular quality of breath that is moving through your body right now, in the quiet that is present beneath the listening, in the fact that you are here, fully, without needing this moment to be anything other than exactly what it already is. That is arrival, not the arrival of something external, the arrival of you into your own life, your own love, your own completely undefended and completely capable heart. It was never closed, it was being prepared, and the preparation is complete.